Establishing a brand new ball python gene that wows the entire hobby is probably one of the greatest accomplishments that any breeder can do when they get into breeding ball pythons. And it is so common that just about everyone at some level tries to prove out a dinker gene in order to achieve this accomplishment, ourselves included. And we recently had the very first clutch from one of the 2 African imports that we got a couple years back hatch out, shed, and we might have some answers. We might have a direction to go in the future. So for this week's video, we are going to be talking about how do we establish a dinker project, what are the challenges that we face when we are trying to prove out and establish a new gene, and we are going to give some answers to one of our dinker animals. My name's Steven with Leviathan Snakes, and let's get to it. Back in the fall of 2021, COVID was really kicking off and the height of the ball python boom was in full swing. And with this, there were lots of people buying pretty much any animal that hits the market. And with all of the new people coming into the hobby, hearing all of the stories about the heyday of ball pythons when it comes to a new morph coming out every other month, a lot of people, ourselves included, wanted to try to do it for ourselves. So what we did is we went to Outback Reptiles and we looked at some of their special ball pythons, which isn't the special morph, but instead it's dinker projects that came in from Africa, whether they were wild caught animals or they were captive hatched animals, and they looked different than a normal ball python. And what we ended up doing is that we got 2 of those animals. We got a male and we got a female that didn't actually look the same, but we'll throw up some B-roll of them throughout this video. And we wanted to try to establish a brand new gene. And when we first started posting pictures of specifically the male, a lot of people thought that it was really, really cool. And again, you have to understand that in the fall of 2021, you could put up just about anything and have people beating down your door in order to buy that animal from you. And we actually had offers just by showing pictures of this dinker animal from Africa of people wanting to buy him from us in order for them to try to prove out whether or not he has a gene that hadn't been discovered yet. Now, just simply off of his appearance, he has very clean, reduced look to his alien heads. Also, he has a strong dorsal, kind of black back look to him, and when you are looking at his belly, there is a pretty much clean belly with these strong tracks going down his sides. So, with this information in mind, there were a couple different possibilities that we didn't actually really think about when we got him because, again, we were fairly new when we first purchased him. But once we got more experience, we wanted to make sure that he wasn't inchy, that he wasn't orange dream, and that maybe he wasn't het pied, because all of those different influences could potentially explain an animal that looks like him that was coming from the wild. Going on from here, we tried to pair him in 2022, 2023, I don't remember exactly what year it was, to a clown female, because our idea was if all of the babies are normals, then we will very easily be able to tell if they look like him or if they don't look like him, and they would all be het clown. But we tried pairing him throughout that whole year and she never went, so we were a little disappointed. So going into the 2023-2024 season, because we weren't able to actually get any clutches from him and prove out his genetics, we paired him to a single gene GHI girl. And the reason why we wanted to do this is that our thoughts are we might still get a normal, because there's only one other gene in this pairing, that could really prove out whether or not his appearance was genetic, at least incomplete dominant or dominant, but we might also be able to make a GHI plus whatever his dinker gene is. And that could also let us kind of jumpstart on a combo for this project, but we aren't necessarily wasting a visual clown female if he doesn't prove out to really pass anything along with his offspring. So we ended up pairing them, they locked, all of that stuff, and she ended up giving us 7 eggs. So we were pretty excited about this, or at least I was pretty excited about this. Courtney, the entire time, kind of felt that we were just going to end up getting a clutch of GHIs and normals. So I am excited about the idea that we have 7 different eggs because that makes sure that we have a lot of different opportunities to try to prove him out. And as the babies ended up hatching out, it was pretty obvious that for the most part we got quite a bit of GHI, and just simply off of the initial odds, I was a bit disappointed because we had 2 normals that were very clearly normals and they didn't look like him, and all of the others, at least in the egg initially, just looked like GHIs. So when we did the egg cutting, already I was disappointed with this, but they ended up coming out of the egg, and when they came out of the egg before they shed, I noticed that there was one specific GHI animal that had subtle differences from the others, and this specific GHI animal, once it completely shed out, potentially might have enough of an influence where I'm like, maybe that the male, the Dinker gene in the male, did pass on to this animal, but it's not a super strong interaction, or at least it's not a super strong interaction with GHI. But with all of this said, it could just be polymorphism within GHI. But to describe this appearance, this GHI animal that hatched out from him, it had brighter, more saturated colors to its alien heads, especially compared to its siblings, which I feel like is the strongest indicator on this. In addition, I do feel like that there is a hint of that black back that the dad has in this animal as well, where with other GHI animals, especially in this clutch, that black back isn't as strong of a feature in the other GHI animals that we hatched out. And last one on here is that the belly is fairly clean, and especially towards the tail, you do get to see a little bit of those tracks coming back in. And again, all of this could be polymorphism. This could just simply be a cool looking GHI animal, but one of the good things for this girl is that she is a female, so it doesn't really hurt us that much in order to hold her back and grow her up for however long it takes her to go, and then eventually pair her back to the sire of this clutch for the chance, maybe very, very small chance, that there is a super form of this gene, and maybe that super form isn't subtle. It potentially could be something really, really cool. So backing up a little bit, we approached this Dinker project in a way that was completely different than the way that other breeders proved out Dinker animals in the years previous. And the way that we did this different is that we utilized shed testing specifically on the sire of the clutch. So we had sent in the sire's shed into Rare Genetics Incorporated, and we ran a full panel on him, because what we were wanting to know was whether or not this boy was inchy, whether or not he was OD, or whether or not he was het pied. And when the shed test panel came back, he was negative for all of those. So we were super excited about that, but there was one specific caveat that realistically threw a wrench in all of the things that we've talked about so far, and that is that he did prove heterozygous for 2 different genes. And these 2 different genes were in fact DGA and DGB, and at this point in time we now know that DGC is the only one of the DG type genes that actually controls whether or not an animal is visual DG, if it's het for DG, or if it's not DG at all, and he didn't have DGC, so he's not het for DG. But with that, there's a lot of evidence that says that the American ball python breeding hobby has been selectively breeding for DGA and DGB in the DG animals, and the way that we could potentially be doing this without really knowing it is if it has a visual effect on the phenotype. And with all of this, that means that either DGA or DGB, or potentially even both together, have a visual effect, a visual phenotype on an animal that is separate from the desert ghost gene. And if this is the case, that means that this is a inheritable genetic, and that it is being expressed in this specific baby and potentially the dad, because the dad is het for DGA and het for DGB. But it means that it's not actually a brand new gene. So what we need to do at this point in time is send this specific baby's shed off in order to get it tested and see if it is het for DGA or het for DGB. And if it is, that is another piece of evidence to support that this isn't a new gene, it is just simply, let's say, DGB, and DGB has a visual effect on the phenotype. So with all of this said, I am pretty disappointed about the results of the clutch so far, but it's still really, really interesting in order to see and explore all of these different aspects of the ball python breeding world. Anyways, we hope you guys enjoyed the video. If you did, please don't forget to hit the like button, leave a comment, and subscribe, and we will see you next week.